Okay, so the last section that you're going to be responsible for on this upcoming exam is section 10. And again, there's way more information in this section than I expect you to know, so focus on what's in these slides, and even some of the details might be too much information. So what I want you to get from here is basically understanding what the metabolic rate is, which is our body's rate of energy output. It's also the total heat that's produced by all chemical reactions and mechanical work that our body is accomplishing. How do we measure our metabolic rate? Well, we can measure it directly using a calorimeter, and we can measure it indirectly by a respirometer, to measure our oxygen consumption. So when we use a respirometer to measure our oxygen consumption, this is going to be directly proportional to heat production. So typically for each liter of oxygen that we actually consume, the body produces about 4.8 kilocalories of heat. So that brings us to our basal metabolic rate. And the basal metabolic rate, or our BMR, is going to reflect the energy the body needs in order to perform most essential activities. So when we're talking about essential activities, we're talking about things like breathing, helping maintain resting levels of organ function, and that's why we call it the basal metabolic rate. It's measured in the post-absorptive state, typically in a reclining position where you are relaxed both physically and mentally. And for an accurate BMR, you typically want to be at a room temperature of about 20 to 25 degrees Celsius. We record our BMR as kilocalories per square meter of body surface per hour. So for example, a 70 kilogram adult male of average height would have a BMR of approximately 66 kilocalories per hour. So you can approximate your BMR by multiplying your weight in kilograms by 1 if you are a male, and you would multiply it by 0.9 typically if you're a female. So our BMR is influenced, obviously, by age and gender. We just saw the difference in a male versus a female. Our BMR would decrease with age, and males typically have a higher BMR than females. If we increase our body temperature, we are also going to increase our BMR, and stress is also thought to increase our BMR. The last thing that I want to mention is that the amount of thyroxine that's produced by our thyroid gland is going to actually probably be the most important hormonal factor that we have in determining our BMR. And this is because thyroxine is basically our metabolic hormone, and it has a direct effect on almost all of our body cells with the exception of our brain cells, and its effect is to increase oxygen consumption and heat production. So it's going to accelerate the use of ATP to help operate those sodium potassium pumps that are in the plasma membrane of cells. Just clinically, we kind of mentioned this a little bit when we were talking about our endocrine system, but hyperthyroidism, and hypothyroidism are based off of our metabolism. So hyperthyroidism causes a lot of problems resulting from a really, really, really high BMR. So the body catabolizes all of our adipose tissue, our stored fat, as well as proteins. Despite increased hunger and food intake, the person typically loses weight. You also can have your muscles weaken and your bones also weaken. If we're talking about hypothyroidism, this results in a really slow metabolism. Typically, you end up with obesity and can end up with a reduced thought process as well. So that brings us to our total metabolic rate, and this is the rate of kilocalorie consumption that is actually needed to fuel all of our ongoing activities, whether these activities are voluntary or involuntary. So this is going to include our basal metabolic rate, or BMR. If we increase our skeletal muscle activity, we are also going to increase our total metabolic rate. If we increase our food ingestion, that is also going to increase our total metabolic rate. And we would have the highest total metabolic rate if we have a huge amount of protein in our diet or if we are consuming alcohol. And you do not need to